All right, everybody, it's 9:01, so let's get this party started. Hey, I'm Angie Rupert, founder of Rupert Law Group. We handle exclusively E2 and E1 visas. So no matter what treaty country you're from or in what state you want to be, we can help as we have discussed. And as you guys know, so today we're going to talk a lot about the E2 visa for Canadians specifically. The great news is that Canada is second or third most E2s in the world. So they are very well trained in Toronto. They know all about the E2 visa. And a lot of our clients are from Canada. We deal with them a lot. And in fact, some very exciting news to share that I just got about 15 minutes ago. We just had another approval in Toronto today. So yay, exciting. We have a new E2 investor, the world's newest potentially approved only moments ago in Toronto. They are going to be running a candy factory. Interesting, right? They're going to have kind of a shop that makes chocolates and different types of candies. So with that said, I thought we had a chat here. Tatiana, did we have a chat? I thought maybe there were a couple of questions already in the chat because I saw it, but now I don't see the chat. Hold on just a second. I'm sorry, guys. And this is, let me assure you that we are better at handling E2 visas than we are at dealing with technology. I promise, or at least I am, right? So anyway, let's get started today. So as we talked about, Canada has lots and lots of E2 visas, as you probably already know. If this is a new or a renewing E2 visa, you'll be going to Toronto. If you already have an existing E2 visa that is still valid and you want to add either family members or employees, you can go to the other consulates as well. But for a new E2 and a renewal for your E2, you're going to be going to Toronto. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Here we go. Oh, here we go. Okay. Great. So I would also ask you, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and add them to the chat. We'll get to as many as we can, or all of them. If there's not enough questions, we'll just get to all of them. But in the meantime, so let's talk about a little of some of the most common businesses that we get for Canadians. Now, I want to preface this by saying any business, as long as it's legal, obviously, right? And that you're going to make revenues that can support your family as well as employees, and that you're going to have customers or clients. Pretty much anything can work. So, and also another thing that I get a lot of questions about the business and that type of thing is, well, what do we buy something? Do we start something? Can we buy something just from kind of like a regular owner? Does it need to be a franchise? And the answer to all of it is yes. It's all possible. It's all doable. And we have done it successfully to all, right? So it is possible as long as you meet the E2 visa requirements. Any of those options are possible. So let's talk a little bit about the differences. Like, why would I start something versus why would I buy something, right? So starting something, typically you can do that for cheaper, but it may take a little bit extra time, okay? So what's more important to you? The time or the investment? Now, buying a business, sometimes the timing, particularly if you already have one picked out, the timing can be pretty quick, but it may be more because if you're buying a successful business, you're going to pay for a successful business, right? That's going to be really important. One thing that we get a lot of is trucking, right? And maybe some of you who are on the chat want to start a trucking company or want to buy a trucking company. So this is really common for Canadians in particular, all right? So we've done it and it is possible, but keep something in mind. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind we'll talk about here, but one of the things is they don't want this to be an owner-operator thing, right? So don't think that you're just going to bring your truck from Canada and now you're driving and living in the United States, right? We need something more substantial than that, not only the investment, but you're going to need employees and things like that. So think of yourself for the trucking business or actually any business, right? Think of yourself more as the CEO of the company, not the kind of owner operator of the company, right? Now, I get this all the time. Well, we can't ever drive the truck? No, that's not true. I mean, of course, in an emergency, but you're going to still need employees. And at the end of 5 years, you're going to need multiple employees. So I just don't want anyone to come with the impression like, great, now I get it. I was driving my truck in Canada. Now I get to move my truck to the US and drive it here. It's not going to be quite like that, right? You need a business, not one asset of a truck plus you as the driver. That will not work. But if you have a couple of trucks, you have a driver or two, you have a contract with an outsourced dispatch company, you have an office space, things like that. Now we're starting to talk about something that resembles an E2 business that could be approved. Kevin, how long does it take to get the Toronto interview scheduled to submit the application next week? I would say at this moment, now these things change literally week to week, sometimes day to day. But right now, if you submit the documentation to Toronto today, I am going to say that you will get an email from the Toronto consulate, either asking for additional documentation or telling you you can schedule an interview within about 3 weeks ish. And once you get that invite to schedule the interview, it's going to be another couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks probably. So probably if you submit it today and everything goes according to plan, your interview will probably be 5, 6 weeks, maybe out to 8 weeks. Now keep in mind these times change all the time, but also summer tends to be a lot busier. So as we get to summer, you might see those wait times extend a couple of weeks, right? That's just kind of the name of the game. Also keep in mind that in kind of the August, September time, that's when a lot of the consular officers move. So just in case you guys don't know, the consular officers are only at post for about 2 years, right? So if you get a job working at the Toronto consulate, then you're not there just for a lifetime. You're not there for 15 years or 20 years or until you quit or whatever. They move you around a lot. So a lot of times that happens in the late summer, very early fall. So keep that in mind that sometimes that contributes to a lag time as well. So it really depends on, of course, the consulate. Now, here's the other key, because this is something that we struggle with, because of course we want to help our clients all the time. But once that application is at the consulate, now we're on the consulate schedule, their timing, their rules, their stuff, right? And they have thousands of E2 applications every year. So they have a very specific way of handling things. And your attorney has no control over the timing. Okay. So everybody understand that the attorney has absolutely zero control over the timing. But what we can say is, hey, we've submitted 3 or 4 people in the last month. This is generally what's happening right now. So we can give you kind of an idea of what's happening right now, but understand if it takes longer to get your interview, sometimes that's just the breaks, right? That's totally up to the consulate. They kind of run the show once that application is out of your attorney's hands. So kind of keep that in mind as well. So Kevin, hopefully that answered your question. I actually got an email question a little bit ago, someone who wasn't able to join us today. So let's pull that up, shall we? This is actually about a multiple gifts, right? So now we're talking about investment. What if I get gifts from multiple people? Can I do that? And the answer is yes, you can do that, as long as it all makes sense, right? That's kind of like the through line with all of these things in the E2 visa, as long as it makes sense. So if you have multiple gifts, you'll need multiple letters describing that. In some instances, we need to have things, it depends on kind of how you file and some different things, but we will need potentially some background on that person, like their tax returns or something. Now, how did this person have $75,000 to give you? Things like that, right? So keep that in mind. We don't love getting gifts from immediate family or friends in the US, right? It's possible and it's doable, but sometimes it just raises more questions like, your dad's a US citizen and your brother's a US citizen and now they're giving you money. Like, are they just kind of trying to get you down here and figure this is like the fastest way? And so they're trying to kind of bypass potentially immigration laws of, petitioning for you to get a green card and knowing that's going to take 10 to 15 years or whatever, right? So sometimes we get into that. I've had a situation before where a boyfriend gave a girlfriend the money. It is possible. It is. But it raised a lot of red flags at the interview. Like, well, oh, you've got this boyfriend in the US. So what, are you guys going to get married? Like, why is he giving you this much money? What's going on? Are you going to live with this guy? So you kind of keep that in mind as well. Also, it's really good to keep for the investor to have at least 20 to 25% of the investment just come from his or her own personal savings or sale of a business or sale of real estate or a credit line or something like that, right? It's really good for that investor, even though gifts are fine, but it's nice to show that the investor has a little skin in the game too. It really makes that officer feel a little bit more confident that the investor is gonna really work hard to make sure that the business is successful. That's always a goal. I'm looking to buy a running cell phone repair store in Texas, and it is valued at $89,000. What would you recommend about the approval chances of the basis? Well, so think about this. It's gonna be more than 80 to 90,000, right? Because first of all, you're gonna have to have an attorney. You're gonna have to have a business plan. You're going to have to pay for a couple of months up front, probably for the lease. This is something that I always tell everyone who's buying an existing business. You got to talk to the landlord before you fall too far in love. Because if the landlord says, yeah, we don't assign leases and this has got another 5 years and we're just not going to assign it. Well, now you're out of luck, right? So make sure you talk to that landlord. Now, as someone who doesn't currently live in the United States, as someone who may not even have a valid visa to be in the United States, of course, as Canadians, we know that you can be down here for months at a time, but sometimes the landlord might feel a little nervous about that, right? And so might say, hey, you need to pay at least 3 months up front. So right there, you're going to be over 100, right? Just with those additional items, even if the cost of the business is 80 to 90,000. Now, anytime you're buying a business, you can buy the business, you can buy the assets of the business. Some of that's a little semantics when we're talking about small businesses that are under, $200,000 or $300,000. Sometimes it's mostly just the inventory or the assets, right? But we need some sort of, if you're actually buying the business, we need some sort of appraisal on that. And the asking price for that business should be within 5 to 7% of what it's appraised at, right? For your own protection and to ensure that the officer knows that you are paying for the fair market value of that business. So something else to keep in mind whenever you're buying a business, right? Okay, another email from Kevin. Can early withdrawal of applicants' U.S. 401k retirement account for the legitimized fund? Yeah, as long as it's yours, right? And obviously that you had work authorization during the time that you were accumulating that 401k, which I assume that you do, right? But sometimes you have to show, depending on whether you apply at the consulate or whether you apply at USCIS, like how detailed information you need. But you need to make sure that you were obviously authorized to work in the United States at the time that 401k you were contributing to it. And you need to show that it's yours, right? That it's not someone else's or whatever. And if it is, that could also work, but we would definitely need to show some more documentation to show that that's going to work. Okay, so cool. If I buy 50% share to an existing company that belongs to a friend or relative, friend is better than relative. I got to be honest, Mahul. They don't love it. They really don't love it, right? And in fact, I did another video on this that you should probably check out too. So again, you're going to have an appraisal by a third party, right? To show that you are buying the fair market value of that business. Okay. So if the business is valued at $400,000 and you're going to buy a 51% share, you're now in it for $210,000, right? So keep that in mind. If the business is valued at like $60,000 or something, you got to figure out why it's worth so little. Now, if it's a relative, they don't love it. I always say just avoid the relatives, because now we kind of get back to what we were talking about with those gifts, right? Where it's like, well, I've got all of these US relatives and their concern and their thought is that what's going to happen is that you are going to, you're going to pay your relative, whatever. Let's say the business is valued at $300,000. Fine. What their concern is that you're going to say, okay, cousin, whatever, here's $150,000, and then you get your visa and then come down here, and cousin goes, okay, here's your money back. Enjoy your time. Bye. They do not want that, right? Like, they need to know that that money is truly at risk and you're not going to get it back. So anytime that you're buying, I always say just avoid relatives if you can. I think it's a much safer bet. But for sure, you're going to need an appraisal from a third party company that does business appraisal, so you know that you're paying the fair market value. And then, depending on the structure of the business, right? Is this an LLC? Is this a C Corp? Is it an S Corp? Because an S Corp might, now you need to talk to your US tax attorney or accountant, but an S Corp could be broken by having a non-US resident buy into it. The seller may not know that. I do not know. And that could mess up a lot of things, right? On their part. So keep that in mind if it's an S Corp. If it's a C Corp, how are you going to structure this? Are you going to be buying the shares directly from the other owner? Or are you going to be buying shares from Treasury, right? But in either way, I mean, honestly, you really should be buying from Treasury. Same for an LLC, buying into the membership, not buying someone else's membership. And here's the difference. When you put that money in, it goes to the business account, not to that other person. And then you also need to spend it, okay? Because they need to see that it's at risk. So you can't just give it to your cousin who could just give it back to you the day you land. You need to put it into the business account, then buy a bunch of stuff. So now the money's gone. Whether you get the visa or not, that money is spent and the business has expanded because of your ownership in it, right? So it's not like you're just cutting a business in half. You're actually growing the business. That's another key. So hopefully that helps. Manage businesses requiring specific permits or licensing. Yeah. Alcohol sale. Avoid liquor licensing if you can. It's a huge pain in the behind. It's doable. We've done it. Actually, I don't deal with liquor licensing, but we have had Canadian clients get liquor licenses. Yuck. It's a mess. Okay, let's see. Alcohol sale, lottery, cigarettes, food, pharmacy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they're all allowed, but you have to get the licensing. Now, the licensing, depending on the type of business, is going to vary a lot, right? From state to state. So liquor licenses have different rules in every state. Hair salons, that's another one. They have different rules in every state. Construction companies have different rules in every state. So they all have to have licensing, but you got to check the state first, right? And you should have whatever licenses or permits are needed before you apply, because they want to see, one of the requirements for the E2 visa is called real and operational. And basically, they want to see that once they give you this visa, if they decide to give you the visa and you get it, you're going to go to the US and it's already rocking and rolling. Everything's ready to go. Not, oh, here's the visa. Then you go down and then you take all your tests and then you get licensed and all that. Because what if you don't pass the test? What if you're not able to even take the test for 6 months? You're just sitting around staring out the window, right? So there's a couple of things to consider when you're talking about permits and licensing. Number one, and we've had this happen, right? So we know that, this is just an example, but we know that construction companies general contractors and that type of thing need licensing. So sometimes what we do, if you had a business like that, one of your options is start with just handyman services, a company that does not need a specific type of license, right? Obviously check with the state. States have different licensing schemes for different types of businesses, but start with some services that don't need a license. And then in the business plan, we talk about, hey, within a year, we plan on expanding our services to these other things that do need a license. But you can at least get the business operational. You've got customers, you've got things going on, even without the license. Then once you get down here and figure out all the licensing. So that's one way of handling it, okay? The other way is maybe you already have a license, which is awesome. And then you can kind of move forward. Alternatively, depending again on the type of business and depending on the state, maybe having a business partner, even like a super minority, right? Like 1 or 2% that has a license might be able to use that license for the business. So again, that depends on the type of business, that depends on the state, but that's another option potentially. So hopefully that helps. But I would really try to avoid liquor licensing. It's the United States is very weird about our alcohol. So I would try to avoid it. Property management company. Flipping houses I hate, by the way. How can I put a business plan, a W-2 employee as I would be managing it by myself? No, don't. You wouldn't do that, right? You always need an employee. We always recommend that you have an employee at the time of application, at least a part-timer. So you don't want to do that. You need to have a legitimate situation, right? Just keep in mind that the first time that you go to this interview is the best chance you ever have for approval. So you want to go in strong. Don't go in a weak position and then think, oh, if I'm denied, I'll just go back with more documentation, because it's way harder the second time. That's reality. So go in with a strong application. So I want everybody to think a little bit about their mindset doing this E2 visa too, right? So there are two ways to approach this. Approach number one is, hey, here are the 6 requirements. Let's go 10% beyond the requirement. So we feel so confident about this application that only if something goes really far awry in this interview, something's going to go wrong. That's one approach. Approach number 2 is, well, they say $100,000 investment. What if I invest like $85,000 and then hopefully it'll get approved and I'll save myself $15,000? Let's go with what may work, what might work. I'm not saying it won't work, but let's just go on the more probable than not approach and hope that it all works for the best. Okay. So we do not do that approach. We don't let our clients do that approach either, unfortunately, because it doesn't help us, right? Because then we have clients who get denied and we have to help them again, and this type of thing. So we're always going to advise you on the best way of doing this and meeting those requirements and exceeding them by about 10%. That way everybody gets to sleep at night and we have a really good feeling that you will likely be approved, right? Now, everybody knows in the world of immigration, the consular officer is the one that makes the decision, not you, not me. So it's ultimately up to them, but we want to make it so easy for them to say yes, right? We want to make it easy to say yes. We don't want to have them think. We don't want them to look at the documents and go, well, this is okay, could work. Now, let me see. What are my feelings about this? We don't want to get into that. We want them to look at this application and go, wow, great application. Without hesitation. Because also know this about the consular officers, okay? They have to justify their decisions to their boss, right? And so when you have an application that's put together, it's clear, it's easy to understand, all of the requirements are met or exceeded, and they approve it, they've got no problem justifying that to their boss. But when they approve something that's kind of like, maybe, now they have to come up with reasons to justify, right? And if they can't come up with a real clear reason to justify, guess what might happen? Right? So consider that whenever you're doing this, don't think about, well, what's the minimum I can do? Well, what's the minimum I can do for this or the minimum? Think about what makes this application strong and easy to say yes, right? That's always our goal. So keep that in mind too. Okay. So, gosh, we're getting a little bit closer. Daniel, can I work on something else besides my E2 business? No, you cannot. Actually, your visa will have the name of the business printed on there, and that is the only business that the E2 applicant can work for. Now, if any of you are married, your spouse will get a kind of general authorization to work. So your spouse can work anywhere or not work at all. Your spouse could start a new business, could work for the E2 business, could work for any other company in the United States that will have him or her, right? And so the spouse has a lot of flexibility, right? A lot of flexibility. The E2 applicant has the name of the business printed right on that visa. That is the only business that you have authorization to work for. You cannot work for any other business, okay? But think about the services with that in mind. Think about the services that your business is offering. Now, if you have a sushi restaurant, for example, That's pretty clear. But what if you're doing some sort of like consultation business, right? Or rather a consulting business. So now, let's say you're doing IT consulting, another thing that we get a lot of questions about. Well, so maybe you're not working for another company, but maybe that company is paying your company for IT consulting work, right? Maybe something to consider. So maybe it's a client, not an employer. That's a possibility, right? Because then that fits the E2 visa requirements, which is you should have customers or clients. Oh, we do have a customer or client, right? So consider that as well, Daniel. Okay. All right, Kevin, last gasp here. I'm going to answer this one and then we're going to wrap for today. But thank you all in advance. Thank you all so much for joining today. We're really, really happy to we're really happy to have all of you, and of course, happy to answer additional questions if you reach out independently. Can the E2 business in the future hire employees other than U.S. citizen, green card holder, for example, an H-1B? I mean, well, H-1Bs are a nightmare, as you may already know, right? They're a lottery system. You're going to pay for it whether the person gets chosen or not. The odds are something like 25%, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. F1 OPT. I mean, again, can you, as long as they have authorization? Yes, but you got to make sure they have authorization. So if that's an extra step that you really want to get involved in, maybe. But for the F1, it's got to be approved through the school, and they've got to put it into CVIS. For H-1B, you got to go through a lottery system. There are only certain dates that are available and whatever. So honestly, it's a hassle. I mean, technically, can you do it? Yes. Would I recommend it? No, I wouldn't. Because also keep in mind the spirit of the E2 visa, right? The reason that it exists is to get foreign investment and to increase employment in the United States. So they're looking for you to spend money in the US and hire US employees and green card holders. That's the whole spirit of it, right? So can you do this? Yeah, I mean, it's legal. I mean, as long as the H-1B requirements are met, the OPT, obviously no one can really work on F1s, but if you're OPT, it's all met. But you're not really increasing the quality of your case by doing that, right? You can do it, but what they really want to see is that you're hiring U.S. citizen and green card holders. So, and it's a lot less hassle that way, right? Because green card holders and citizens can work anywhere, and you don't have to deal with the sponsorship and all of those things. So keep that in mind. All right. So with that, thank you all again for joining. Pleasure to speak with you. Obviously, reach out anytime. We would be happy to set up some time to speak with you about the individual facts of your E2 visa. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. Thanks so much. Bye.